Kia ora tātou, tēnā tātou, nau mai haere mai ki tēnei hui. Kia ora everyone, e mihi ana kia koutou kua hara mai ki tēnei strategy and policy hui, tēnei rā. Mihi atu ana ki o tātou mate rātou te hunga kua riro. Hoi no rātou kia rātou te hunga mate tātou kia tātou te hunga ora huri no tēnā tātou. Welcome everyone to our strategy and policy meeting today. It's good to see the councillors that are here. We've got a few apologies today, and I'll go through those. But those that are here, tēnā tātou staff, tēnā koutou katoa, ko hara mai nei, I tēnei rā, members of the public, kia ora tātou, and ngā tāngata e mātakitaki mai nei te live feed, kia ora koutou. No mai haere mai. So just a reminder that we have a live stream today, and councillors, if you've got your iPads open, make sure that they're not blocking your microphone. We have had complaints from the live feeders that they cannot hear our kōrero because our iPads are covering the microphone. So ka pai. So no mai haere mai. We're not going to have a waiata today because we've got too many apologies and all our songbirds aren't here today. So we just waiwake tērā. But e mihi ana kia tātou ko taima I tēnei rā. So we have apologies from Mayor Hazelhurst, and then councillors Redstone, Lawson, O'Keefe, Councillor Ollie, and also Nick Dawson, our Rural Community Board Chair, and Tanya Eden, our Heretanga Takatonoa representative. So I'm happy to move those apologies, seconded by Councillor Watkins. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, ki mai ai? Aye. Any against?
May I request a leave of absence?
Yep.
So looking for the 25th of November, unfortunately it's a teacher only day, so I'm required with my children, and also looking at December 16th, which is a half day with school end of year.
And likewise 24th through to the 27th November.
Any other requests for leave? Kyle? All right.
Happy to move.
Happy to move. Councillor Kerr, seconded by Councillor Dixon. All those in favour, ki mai ai? Aye. Any against? Carried. Kia ora. Conflicts of interest. Councillors, if any conflicts, please raise them when we get to those items, and we'll manage them as we do. All right. So we have the minutes of our last hui, the Strategy and Policy Committee meeting that was held on the 10th of September. I need someone to move those. Councillor Harvey, seconder. Councillor Sholem, I'll put that. All in favour, ki mai ai? Any against? Carried. Okay, let's move to item 4. Councillors, what we have here is a summary of recommendations of the Great Community Subcommittee that was held on the 3rd of November. And I'll take those as read. The main take that was discussed and ratified at that subcommittee meeting was the multicultural strategy. And we have Louise here who's going to present the strategy, and so tēnā koe, nau mai, Louise, kei a koe te wā. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. I'll just make it big. Apologies, everyone. Kia ora koutou. I'll take the report as read, but this strategy has been through a process with a number of our community leaders, and as well as Councillor Geraldine Travers and Councillor Kevin Watkins. So I just wanted to acknowledge them first and foremost with the development of the strategy, because the working group worked very hard over a couple of years to pull this together, and it reflects the thoughts and the feedback of our community, but also our stakeholders. Also, I'd like to acknowledge our working group members that are in the room. So Rizwana Latif, Sally Russell, and Amatanga Ioli, who are all on a working group, and also our Paula Stoddard. Thank you. So just a bit of background, some interesting statistics there. 17% of our population in the Hastings district were actually born overseas. And when you compare the 2013 statistics, census statistics, with the latest 2018 ones, you can see from that pie graph that we are actually increasingly becoming a more diverse community. Being inclusive, being welcoming, and a sense of belonging form the vision of the strategy. Those are the goals, which are also on page 9. The last goal was actually identified by feedback from the community. We got a lot of feedback from people saying they were really interested in seeing a diverse workforce. They were really interested in seeing themselves in the people of this council. The strategy acknowledges the Treaty of Waitangi. It has a treaty framework which acknowledges that Ngāti Kahungunu hold mana whenua for this district, and their manaaki extends to all the cultures that are here. So this principle is reflected in the mihi, or the greeting, which is at the front of the strategy, provided by Mr. Mike Paku, who you all know, the chair of Te Haro Board, Te Taiwhenua o Heretaunga. It's also reflected in the strategy principles themselves, and the inclusion of the Heretaunga Whakatauki, which you're all very familiar with also, and all the strategy principles are on page 11. So the working group worked together to identify priority actions. We got a huge amount of feedback and ideas from the community, a lot of ideas from the working group members themselves, as well as stakeholders, huge amount. So they spent a lot of time going through and working out what those priority actions should be, and how they contribute to those goals that I mentioned earlier. Just to mention a few, so goal 1, multiculturalism and diversity is celebrated in the Hastings district. That includes developing a cultural calendar, which identifies a range of cultural events that take place in the district. And so what's behind that is being able to share across the community all of the different cultures and learn about the different cultures that are here. Goal 2, Hastings is a welcoming, inclusive and safe place for all. One of the actions there is supporting connections with mana whenua. An example of that is last year the Hawke's Bay Multicultural Association members visited Waipatu Marae. More recently this year, with the response around COVID-19, Tihei Moriora welcomed migrant communities and the response to those communities within that response, and that has actually continued. Priority actions for Goal 3, quite a key one and quite fundamental around our relationships with different cultures in the district, is developing a really strong cultural database, so a database of contacts around different cultural groups in the district and leaders. And that's kind of like seen as a tool for a lot of things around connection, sharing information, those types of things. Priority action for Goal 4, all residents feel empowered to participate in council decision making. Citizenship ceremonies is an opportunity to potentially build on key communications in different languages are really useful, and an example of that has been different translations being provided in the COVID-19 response this year, as well as our curbside, new curbside services. And priority Goal 5, Council to be a role model for cultural diversity in the workforce. One of the key actions here is to develop a diversity workforce policy. So in terms of next steps, while there's room for a lot of collaboration with stakeholders, a lot of the actions are for Council to drive in partnership with others. So a group of relevant officers and partners will be brought together, those who have a part to play in implementing the actions. And we'll meet regularly to deliver on the actions and the projects, and we'll report progress to you via the Operations and Monitoring Committee on a regular basis. So thank you, Mr. Chair. That's my presentation.
Well, thank you, Louise, for your presentation. Awesome. Yeah, it's a great thing. So we're going to take questions. I te tuatahi first. Those that have questions. I've got a couple here already, and then we'll take comments. Ka pai, kei a koe, Geordie.
Well, I don't actually have a question. My reason for turning on my light is to say it would be my great pleasure to move the policy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ka pai. So we have a mover for the recommendations on page 7. Seconder,
Yes.
Councillor Sholem. I'll put that recommendations be moved and seconded and supported by council. All those in favour, ki mai ai. Any against? Ka pai. Motion carried. Yeah. No, we can open it up to questions and comments for those that want to. So, Councillor Sholem.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I recently was really lucky to be able to join our Fijian Indian community for their Diwali celebrations, and there was some fun ribbing there of our neighbours in Napier to hurry up and take our lead with our development of this strategy, and therefore I'm thrilled to see that it's passed. I think this is something that we have wide-reaching support in our community for, and I would just like to acknowledge everyone who has worked so extensively on the development of this, and may we continue with collaboration.
Councillor Watkins.
Yeah, through you, Chair. I'd just like to acknowledge the work Louise has done. It's been a long work, it's been a hard work and a comprehensive work. And this policy does reflect the multicultural nature of our community. And we now have a framework to engage those people. And often minorities come into other communities, and because they're minorities, there's a shyness and a reticence to sort of feel they're quite equal and shouldn't engage in civic matters. And I think one of the strengths of this policy is that we're going to encourage all those people and say, you are part of Hastings, you are us, and I'm looking forward to that engagement. So particularly to you, Louise, thank you.
Councillor Kerr.
Kia ora, I'd just like to agree with the previous speakers and to acknowledge that Mayor Sandra's not here. She's in Wellington speaking to other rural and provincial mayors and chairs from throughout New Zealand. And to just repeat her comment, how incredibly proud she is of the strategy and the work that everyone has done in the background. So her thanks.
I just support those comments. I, along with others, had the opportunity to attend the International Cultures Day at Cornwall Park earlier. Was it this year or last year? But anyway, it was fantastic. It was awesome, you know, and my kids loved it, walking around with the flags and whatnot. So kia ora to the komiti whakahaere, mihi ana kia koutou I tēnei mahi nui whakahirahira. It's a great strategy and one that's going to, as others had said, weave in the many cultures that are living here in Hastings at this time. So kia ora koutou, o tira, tēnā tātou. Thank you. Bye-bye. All right, let's move down to item 5, the Residential Intensification Design Guide and Financial Incentives. And we have a presentation and it's going to take us through that.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. Kia ora tātou. So we just wanted to take you through 3 components relating to this report. So the primary purpose of this report is to adopt the Residential Intensification Design Guide as a non-regulatory tool. So I just wanted to recap on the process that we've been through and how we've arrived at those recommendations. Then Ashley is going to take you through the financial incentive options to encourage more medium density developments to occur. And finally, Emily will go through the communications plan to launch the Residential Design Guide. So we introduced the Design Guide at a workshop with you in September, took you through the content and the purpose and objectives of the guide to encourage more high quality, high amenity housing developments. We presented the guide to Landmarks and they were supportive and positive about the guide's intent. And then in November, we took the design guide and the recommendations from implementation to the District Plan and Bylaws Committee. And that committee supported the adoption of the design guide as a guideline initially for a 12-month period and to monitor the effectiveness of the guide over that period. The committee subcommittee also requested that the Tiranga Māori design principles be incorporated into the design guide as a fundamental component of the guide, and we have done that under the guidance of Dr. James Graham, and we've incorporated them into the Tiranga principles, have been interwoven into the residential design principles and included in the descriptions of those 6 principles. Do you want to say?
Kia ora koutou, kia ora Anna. Yes, so as you can see on this visual here that encapsulates the original intent of the framework in terms of the residential design principles, and under direction we've utilised existing frameworks within our region and that have grown out of the region and align them with this residential design project. And so Te Aranga design principles come out of the inaugural Māori architects and landscape architects national hui they had at Te Aranga Marae in 2007, from which these principles associated with design and a planning group. And also more recently, you'll be familiar with the Toitu Hawke's Bay strategic framework around the arts and culture for the region. And so included in this construct here are the elements of Toitu, the 4 pillars of Toitu that allow for design, innovation and creativity within the spaces of the region of Hawke's Bay, alongside the Te Aranga design principles that we've scaffolded into here as well, because we are actually already doing this and have been doing this for some time. Examples that spring to mind include Ngā Pou or Heretonga over in Civic Square, the Hastings wastewater treatment plant out at East Clive, Te Ara Kahikatea, the Waiaroha project, so as well as smaller scale projects like the Hoku Nui sculpture in town here, the Haro Te Kahu sculpture in Havelock North. And so, we are doing this, and so Waingako is probably more closer to this concept in terms of housing, and so given the housing context before us and the interrelationships with the social, the economic, the cultural and so on, and well-being and the environmental, that it made sense to align these things together so that they complement one another and provide a sound springboard for us, as well as developers and the private sector, the Crown, to look to for guidance as well here at Hastings District Council. So yeah, that's a bit of a snapshot and an overlay of that process, and we're obviously, well, not obviously, we are with intent looking to utilise this thinking, because these frameworks have been endorsed, well, Toitu has at the council level, and so we might as well bring them alive, or bring them to even more vitality, and execute them out across the community, the district, whether it's in the CBD, whether it's out in our rural communities, with respect to our water treatment facilities, our reserves, our housing, and even our Mahi for Youth type sort of work that we're also doing at the moment. So that's just a bit of a snapshot there, Anna.
Yeah, James, thank you. So the Te Ranga and Toitu principles have been expressly referred into the specific descriptions and characteristics of the residential design principles, and so this is how it will look like in the design guide. And I'll just, so these are the 6 principles: looks good, feels good, then we have fits well, connects well, and works well, and sustainability. So over this next 12-month period that we are recommending the design guide be non-regulatory tool, these can be further developed, and further discussion can be had around these, how Te Ranga and Toitu are incorporated into the design guide. So if you've got any questions before we move on those aspects, before we move on to Ashley's discussion of financial incentive options, happy to take questions now.
Do we have any questions for Anna? Councillor Corbin.
Yeah. The Te Ranga design concepts or guidelines finished yet? Or they still have to be finalised?
Kia ora, Councillor Corbin. There are 7 principles that there are old words and old concepts that were sort of recontextualised in 2007, and so they've been in place since then and have been utilised by different bodies, including territorial authorities, and currently still so. I guess.
So there's no further work or amendment to be done on them before they can be incorporated?
No. So, and I guess the work comes when we reinterpret those within our respective spaces. So it's happening in Auckland, now it's happening in Christchurch, and it's also happening in Hastings, but just in as I said, in an unofficial manner. Like the difference that I mean there is, like in Auckland, in the Auckland Design Manual, there is a Māori component of that whole framework, and it is underpinned by the Te Aranga design principles.
Now, the reason I'm asking the question is because there's a recommendation that they be adopted as soon as possible. So I'm just wondering what the time frame for that is.
I think with respect to the District Planning and Bylaws subcommittee guidance, there was the 12-month period around a non-regulatory aspect to that. So rather than forcing these on, we're sort of socialising and encouraging to the buy-in.
No, I'm talking about the recommendation here, B.
Which recommendation you on, Councillor?
B.
B?
Yeah, that's it. That the council be recommended to adopt the Te Aranga principles and include them as a principal component of the residential intensification design guide and framework as soon as possible. So my question is, what is the time frame for that?
Well, may I ask another question to back onto that? Why do we need the words as soon as possible? Should that not read? This seems like this recommendations come from the subcommittee. Should the recommendation not be that council adopt Te Aranga principles and include them as a principal component in the guide and framework? I just think this has come from the previous committee where we are council and we should adopt today. Councillor Kerr.
I think you're right. The recommendation should be being resolved today, because the group policy and council, and then the principles of the contribution today. I think it is a reflection of the fact that recommendations come first. So that's how I see it, and possibly we should amend it so as to do that. Those principles are being incorporated.
Yeah, right. I was on the subcommittee, and the reason as soon as possible is in there is because we weren't sure of the time frame. We didn't want to leave it for another 12 months until the review period in 12 months' time. So if we can adopt it today, I think that's fantastic, and we just go on from there.
So we could do that. Yeah. We can just full stop it after framework. Just take out as soon as possible. Would that? Huh?
Yeah. So I guess my question back to senior staff is: do we as strategy and policy have the ability to adopt this? Or does this technically and legally have to be adopted by council?
I'm getting some nodding heads. Yes.
My suggestion is you take it as soon as possible, and this resolution will go through forward the council on the 8th, I think it is, and then they can formalise it. That would be the process I would see.
That seems like double.
Order. Hang on. I'm looking at Scott. I think we can do this here at this committee. Am I getting enough yeses?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. We looked at this during the agenda prep, and we thought that the strategy was adoptable in this forum. All the same members are here, and it's pointless double debate to take the council. So you could amend C to recognise, or B to recognise that this is the adoption of the proposed strategy.
We're clear on that, so we can make a change to that part of the recommendation. B, full stop after framework. Get rid of as soon as possible. We're good?
Can I suggest another amendment to that, please?
Yeah.
Should it not be that council adopts? Thank you.
Yeah.
Touch it up. Okay, I've got a few other, Councillor Curry, oh no, yep, Councillor Sholin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, just asking procedurally if we can possibly ask anyone who's speaking to come up to a microphone. I'm just acknowledging that we do have people watching a live stream at the moment, and anyone who's not in front of a microphone will not be heard.
Kia ora, kia ora. Come to the mic. Come to the mic, people. All right, so we're gonna amend that. So in terms of the design guide, no other questions there, because I'm going to move into the incentivisation, financial incentivisation. We can have a discussion about that. Kia ora. Both.
I come up as Baden Barber.
No, I was here for the RAG AGM, and I was sitting right there, grabbing my mic. Sorry.
So just to clarify, comments and discussion for that part of the presentation later, that was only questions you were...
Just questions on the guide itself.
Come back for comments.
Yep.
Thank you.
No, we'll come back after the financial presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So it's just a couple of slides to really support the financial incentives component of your report, which I take as read. You will recall that we touched on a couple of these options in our September workshop, and this is really, I guess, seeking some buy-in, whether council has an appetite to financially support housing intensification, and if it does, how to achieve that and who pays. So there are a couple of options that we've presented in the report today, which is through major changes to our development contribution policy, offering a discount to our DC rate, indirectly through some form of grant, or adopting the status quo, essentially deferring that decision for 12 months to see how the design guide is received by the development community and see whether any form of financial support is actually needed to support the intensification. So in terms of that first option, disaggregate our development contribution further. So if I take one step back in 2007 when we introduced our development contribution policy, we had a relatively aggregated approach. And what I mean by that is we had sort of broader, larger catchments. So in terms of urban development, it didn't matter where you developed, the same HUI rate applied, where all development paid around about $16,000 excluding GST, whether that was greenfield, infill, it didn't matter about the location. There were changes in 2016 to the Local Government Act, which sort of promoted a more user pays, more catchments, but it recognised that there was some constraints and some, it wasn't easy to necessarily create smaller catchments. So there was still some flexibility around council deciding and determining those catchments. In 2006, we did disaggregate our policy more in terms of parks and reserves and stormwater, but water and wastewater still remain in terms of an urban rate. One rate applies to any development within an urban area. So at the moment, our current rates, our infill pays around about 10,300, medium density 11,600 and 19,200 for our greenfield development. So if we were to take one step further in terms of a disaggregated approach around water and wastewater, what essentially that does is shift cost from our infill and medium density developments to greenfields. You'll see size will increase in terms of the DC rate per lot or dwelling and reductions in the infill and medium density rates. So in terms of that approach, obviously it's more user pays and does align with the Local Government Act provisions. It fits in with council's philosophy of growth pays for growth, but is the reduction likely to affect an housing intensification investment decision? Obviously the increase in the greenfield DC may discourage greenfield development, or it certainly might make greenfield development areas more unviable, particularly if we are disaggregating to a further level, if we went down to more localised catchments rather than bucket those greenfield developments together. There is the risk that DC revenue may drop, and there's obviously additional holding cost if council has already invested in an infrastructure. And also there may be indirect pressure to sort of develop what I call good plains land, which is maybe close to the town, because that becomes more cost effective to service. In terms of option B, we could just discount the DC rate, and that could be potentially a 50% reduction or a 100% reduction. And you'll see the quantum in terms of that reduction on those developments in terms of per house. Again, given that a typical housing development is in the range of $400,000 to $500,000, is the reduction going to affect those decisions? Bear in mind it's 2 to 2.5% of the overall development cost. Any funding shortfall would potentially need to come from rates, and obviously we would need to consult on that through our long-term plan. And then there's just, I guess, an example if council was to go down the road of option B. In terms of impact, obviously it would depend on the degree of discount that you were offering, and also the number of applications that we received that met that criteria. But potentially, with the rating pressures we have, potentially adding between 0.25% to 1% is going to be pretty tough this year. In terms of option C, offer a grant-based approach. I guess it would offer greater flexibility in terms of you could tailor your criteria to ensure that you're really meeting those principles of the guide. Again, will it affect that housing intensification investment decision? And there may be perceptions of public welfare, corporate welfare. And again, in the same instance, the shortfall, the funding would need to come from somewhere. And if it came from rates, then again, you could be looking at a significant increase in rates. In terms of status quo, which is option D, again, providing no financial support at this stage. Obviously, there's no financial impact upon that. And whilst our report, we didn't have a preferred option, if we were going to recommend an option to council, we would see this as our preferred option. Recognising those rating pressures and potentially the implications on greenfield development contributions from transferring to that disaggregated approach. And I guess it does provide a good opportunity to see how well the guide is received by the community. Review it in 12 months' time to see actually if we do actually need to put some financial backing and support into the guide. It may be received by the development community that we don't necessarily need to back it financially. And I guess reviewing that position in 12 months provides a good opportunity to do so. I guess today, if we were looking at potentially exploring a financial incentive in 12 months' time, we're just seeking some sort of guidance from council. Is there a preferred option that we could do more further work on and obviously come back to you in 12 months' time?
Thank you for that. Any questions on the Councillor Nixon?
Thank you. In the agenda, item 3, background, it gives the figures of intensification aims for the council and our current performance. Just to reiterate these, our aim is 60% intensification, 35% greenfield, 5% rural. In reality, and I understand the figures for this quarter given here are typical, we're achieving 27% intensification, that's about half, 49% greenfield, that's way over, and 24%, which is what, 5 times more in rural intensification than, or subdivision than our target. Now, over the years, we've, and I've been involved in this, we have on several occasions adjusted the fees we charge for development quite significantly, yet it's not showing up in performance. So my question is, why do we think this is going to actually make a difference, other than the fact it's going to cost some people a lot more money in order to support other people who might not even want that option, but it's simply forced them to doing it?
Through you, Mr. Chair. As officers, I don't think we're not suggesting that it will. What we are sort of canvassing with council today is that the principles have been put out there. we're not sure that a financial incentive will improve those stats as you've just outlined. But it's something for council to consider in the future as to whether further incentivisation for more intensification is required. But we're suggesting that maybe in 12 months' time, with having this guide in place, active promotion of it will give us a better idea as to whether that's actually something that council would want to investigate further.
I mean, I understand the desire that we have for intensification, but I really am questioning whether we're going to achieve it using this means. And if we're not, then I would say, why are we doing it? I certainly think a 12-month delay will give us a bit more time to ascertain are we having any effect or not.
Those first stats are goals for 2045. You know that? Yeah.
Well, all I can really say is that I've been through this exercise a few times over the years, and actually the outcomes have always been very similar. The figures here are not untypical of what we read every time it comes around. I'm just concerned that we're doing something that's not going to have the intended effect, that will have some disadvantages to at least some people.
Councillor, I have Councillors Kerr, Sears, Harvey, Sholem, Watkins.
Just firstly, what is deemed a rural subdivision versus greenfields, please?
So in terms of how we apply development contributions to rural, so every additional lot, new title, is taken as intended for development and would be subject to development contributions. Obviously, those in the rural area don't have access to reticulated council services, so the contribution is significantly lower in comparison to greenfields. We currently charge around about $4,400, including GST, per additional rural lot.
Okay, and so at the moment, nearly 25% of our residential development is rural. So is that, so 25% of all houses that are being built or subdivisions that are being made are out in the rural, in DRA 2, the rural area, rating area 2?
I'm not 100% sure of the classification. I would imagine it's rural. It could include some of the fringes of RA1, but I would believe that to be the case.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to understand what's meant by rural. Is rural, in this context of the statistics that Councillor Nixon raised, is that an additional subdivision and house built on an orchard on the outskirts of Hastings, or is that truly rural in the sense of it's in rating area 2?
Just pass you on to Mr. Clues.
Mr.
Mike,
with a microphone.
I think these are referring
Turn it on.
Right hand side.
I think these are referring to that coming from our monitoring. So the monitoring dwelling consents, probably not called that subdivision at the moment, those numbers. But so there was greenfields, there's infill, so those are residential sites with services. Everything else is classified as rural or rural/lifestyle, so that includes rural residential lots up on the hills, which is why I caution you about trying to sort of measure this to DRA 2 and 1, because it's not effective on that basis.
That was why I asked.
Councillor Sears.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. In terms of option A, B and C, are there any other councils that have been running similar to those options, and have they results as to how they've directed or changed?
I'm not aware of other councils that offer an implicit reduction in terms of their development contributions. I guess councils can, under option A, through their allocation of cost and through the number of catchments they create, actually disaggregate, which will indirectly incentivise particular developments. But I'm not aware of a council that implicitly offers a form of discount to encourage a particular type of development. I know Rotorua a couple of years ago did remove their development contributions from, I think, CBD developments, And that was, I guess, an indication of how you could achieve that outcome. But I'm not aware of any that offer a sort of reduction in terms of residential development.
So we don't have any.
Councils know they do the option A. This council to at least an extent, which you've outlined. But that one does spring to mind is Hamilton, who went down that pathway deliberately to separate out the cost for infill versus greenfields. So their development contributions for greenfields were up about 30,000, which if you followed option A would be about the same here, and about the same, about $10,000 for infill. On the basis that $20,000 difference in the development contributions may have some effect in improving the attractiveness, at least financially, of the infill product as opposed to the greenfields product. At least also at the margins of development, because the margins for infill development tend to be thinner than they do for greenfields development. So a little bit means a lot more for infill than at the greenfields end. The greenfields at the moment don't seem to be having too much problem with viability.
Do we know the changed behaviour up in Hamilton?
No, I don't. But it's if you like, the same philosophy was being applied. Yeah. That if you want to transition away from greenfields to infill, then infill shouldn't really be paying for some of the greenfields costs.
Yep, good point. Very clear. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you. From a consultation perspective, the design guide went out or was shown to some developers, correct? Yep. Was the financial options put in front of or sounded out to any developers?
Oh, we haven't. I guess the next step, if council was supportive of any of those options, would be to update our policies and consult as part of the long-term plan. So I guess there would be an opportunity for the development community to offer their concerns or support for any option that you choose.
Because I'm just concerned that are they hitting the mark? And I look at them as incentives, but also disincentives that we're trying to create here as well. So therefore, are we going far enough? Financial is a tangible, but I'm also wondering what are some of the intangibles and stuff that we can be. And I'm just not sure whether we've gone wide enough.
Recorded a little bit. Councillor Sean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm actually just through you wondering, is there further part to this presentation around the regulatory versus non-regulatory approach, or is that no?
I can go take you through that if you wish.
I guess what I'm interested in is whether or not questions for that are being called for at this time, or if you'd like us to wait, or
No. If you have questions.
Okay, great. I will then. So through you, Mr. Chair, reading through this, it seems that certainly this council seems to have an objective to increase the amount of medium density housing that is within our district in order to stop encroachment onto fertile plains. That's the only logical step that we've got because we are running out of greenfield space. Reading this report, it appears that the different levers that we've got to pull are financial incentives, which is a carrot, to say if you do this, then great, we will give you this, or lessen the impact of this. The other thing that seems to have been touched on within this report as well is whether or not we take the residential intensification design guide and look at, rather than just putting it out as a idea document, a non-regulatory document, we look at putting it out as a more regulatory document through the district plan. So I have questions around that, which I'm hoping someone can answer for me. My first question really is, if council was of a mind to look at that approach, looking at how we implement that within our district plan, I recognise that it's quite a long process in which to change a district plan, not only to give this document teeth, so to speak, but then also in the future, if we wanted to modernise the design guide itself, recognising the fact that the way we build changes over time. Am I right in my assumption that it would be quite a process to change that if it was a regulatory document?
Yes, that's correct. We'd have to go through a plan change to change the design guide if it was included in the district plan.
So we would run the risk if we decided to go down that avenue of potentially inadvertently ending up with quite a restrictive design guide that could actually be counter to what the intent is. The intent being that we have good, modern, safe, medium density housing.
So that is the idea behind having a 12-month monitoring period to assess its effectiveness as a non-regulatory guideline document, as an encouraging document. And as part of that monitoring process, monitoring its success or otherwise, that data could be used to inform any change or regulatory change to the district plan. For example, we could incorporate the key design elements of the design guide into district plan assessment criteria for certain activities, such as comprehensive residential developments.
Thank you. And looking at flipping back now to the incentives, the financial incentives, if council was of a mind to look at the disaggregated, further disaggregating the DCs, what would be the impact of that to any currently planned greenfield development? Because I'm aware that we've got quite a bit across the district, and I'm just interested to understand what the implications would be for that.
Yep, so under our current policy, the development contribution is determined by the application receive date. So any application that's been received prior to any change in policy would be subject to those contributions. It's only moving forward that essentially those developments would be affected.
That's good. And if I may, just one last question. Do we have any understanding at the moment through consultation with the development community as to what the barriers are to going ahead with infill and medium density housing? Why is there a resistance to do that right now?
I could probably answer one part of that question, and then Anna can jump in with probably a more substantive part. But one part is I don't think it's financial as far as the regime that we currently have with our development contributions. The changes that were made in 2016 with creating an infill or a medium density HUI rate, brought those rates down to $10,000 or $11,000 per HUI. So in the context of the cost of a development, that $10,000 or $11,000 is probably not the financial barrier that is stopping infill or medium density from happening. It might be more market related or appeal of going down that path, but Anna or Mark might have some.
One of the things that influences this is that when you've got greenfields land on the market and supply, that's where the housing market will go because it's easier and it's where the premium is. And that will fill their book for 12 months or 18 months, and that's where they'll go. Medium density is more difficult because you're actually having to build the product as well. You don't build to buy, you build and sell. So you've got to outlay a lot of money. You've got to buy the land in advance. You've got to do the subdivision. That's much more time consuming. And so the thinner margins have to also cover a lot more. Whereas the greenfields land, you buy the section, you add your 20% on through your building project, and away you go. So pretty much that's it. That's where it's sitting at the moment. Intensification is hard work, and it requires more outlay. Simple as that.
Thank you.
Councillor Kerr.
Just looking at recommendation D and really trying to understand that if we're going to review this guide in 12 months for all of those reasons from A to H, why we wouldn't wait for that review to consider some form of incentive. And if we didn't do any form of incentive, but for example in 2 years' time decided we should, can we do that change through an annual plan rather than a long-term plan? So are we stuck in this 3-year loop?
No, we're not. We can certainly make changes to our development contribution policy or any other incentive program through an annual planning process.
Thank you.
Yeah, so just in terms of the recommendation, D, so officers are suggesting recommending that we look at incentives after the 12-month
Lovely.
thing. We'll review it in 12 months and to see how the guide's gone, and then whether or not and what maybe if we actually need financial incentives, and if we do, what that looks like. So we have a pre-prepared change to the recommendation.
Just like that.
Yep. So yeah, and I think it's the delete D and add I.
Add an I.
Yep.
Perfect.
Financial incentives could be considered at the end of the review, subject to the effectiveness of the design guide and any identified need for incentives.
Yeah. Can I see the top of the recommendations that have been changed, B and C, please? That be adopted, lovely. And A and B, is it similar, that Te Aranga principles be adopted, lovely. Through you, Mr. Chair, if you're happy to take a recommendation, I'm happy to move it as amended.
Okay, so we have a mover for the recommended or the amended recommendation. Seconder, Councillor Nixon. Are we? Yeah. Oh, that's all right. We can move this and carry on, and then hold the motion. Okay. Okay. All right. Let's finish it off, and then we'll come back to the recommendation. I've got a couple of questions here. We'll just take them. Councillor Travis.
So the idea of a 1-year review seems eminently sensible. But because we, at that stage, at the end of that year, would be considering a variety of options, including financial incentives, and because we have heard that a variety of other councils around the country have considered a variety of other stratagems, including financial incentives, could the report we receive at the end of the year actually have some hard data as to what has actually happened in the markets in those particular cities, both the Rotorua option and the Hamilton option? And in fact, there may well be something else that somebody else has thought of, particularly maybe some of those cities with some more historic architecture. Because there is absolutely no point in our reinventing the wheel, and if someone has come up with an eminently practical solution, then that's all to the good. Just in general, I quite like the fact that in talking about pros and cons of financial incentives, there was the mention of the phrase corporate welfare, which in general is not something that I endorse. So I would need to see some very compelling reasons as to why we would do that.
Councillor Sears.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I was going to ask for the same thing in terms of looking at where it's been implemented and the results, because obviously whatever option we choose on financial incentives has to lead to the outcome, otherwise it's pointless. But I also we are doing comments now, aren't we? Yes, just to comment on, again, we've seen the guide quite a few times, and to acknowledge again what a great document I think it is. And I think this report's excellent because it is quite difficult to balance how to bring about change in a district in terms of the aesthetics and the way a district develops in relation to the reality of developers and people needing to make money, to be viable. So I think it's a real commitment from us as a council to try to change our district in a way that's going to be something for the future. And I absolutely support the 12-month review for a number of the reasons, and also I note that if there's going to be legislation change, that just doesn't make any sense to lock something in now. And as well as this report back on where it is, what is working in terms of financial incentives, I'd also very much like the year to look at the way we can build a little bit more the environmental part of this strategy, because again, as a council now with a dedicated committee for environmental considerations, I think that there's probably more we can incorporate in here to also show our commitment to the way we're developing all our building and all our resources around environmental aspects for our community.
Right, Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thank you. I'm still not sure whether, for me, D does enough, in that it is really just purely looking at the financial incentives or some form of, and I just wonder whether it's better to be some form of incentives, including financial. And if those that moved that prior are happy for an amendment.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's option. Happily support that, Councillor Harvey. I think that's very sensible.
And Councillor Nixon, you happy with that?
Yeah.
Yep, cool. All right.
I did have a question I wanted to ask if I could.
Okay. Well, we'll get. Yep, we'll come down
Councillor
to you.
Kerr
We've
is in front of me.
Councillor Corbin, Councillor Kerr, and then Councillor Nixon. Yep.
I support the motion that Councillor Kerr proposed, but I'd like to ask two things. We've got the desired split in 2045, 60% intensification, 35% greenfields, but what we're getting for our current situation is just a snapshot of a point in time, and it actually doesn't tell us how we're trending from when we set that objective to now, whether we're going the other way or whether we're flat or what. So I'd like to see some sort of trend line on that. And while we're talking about that, the point that Tanya raised about the rural area, if we could break out the hillside developments or whatever and have a fourth line there, and they would actually see the impact on horticultural and rural land and which direction that's heading. The second one I wanted to ask was, through intensification, does the rateable value of a property go up? And is there potential to have more rate revenue from intensification? Because that could be a factor in agreeing to some incentive on the development cost.
Through you, Chair. So, firstly, yes, if there's infill or medium density development, yes, the rateable value of those properties does increase because you're going from what was underlying land value to something that's of more value generally. Does that increase our total rate take? No, because effectively what we do is we say this is our total rates budget for the year, and we allocate that across the rateable properties that we have throughout the district on set predetermined formula. So by having more rateable properties or within our district, that doesn't necessarily mean we have more revenue. Our revenue is based on what we set our budgets to be in the first place, and it's just the allocation process across those properties.
All right, Councillor? Yep, come on. Councillor Kerr?
Just a very simple question. How do we make sure this design guide is kept live and relevant and fresh? Because I love the imagery through it. I've just pulled it back up. I love the imagery through it. I think it's great. But if we don't refresh it, if we look back in 10 years' time, we might go, really? Did we ever think that we should use those colours? Or, you know, imagine if this had been written in the 1970s, we might have been going, oh, that was really interesting. So it's just about that essence of a built-in review, refresh, keep it current. I'm not sure who takes ownership of that.
Yeah, that's fine. So the intention is to translate from the PDF document into a web page document that we can update continually with case studies and examples of good design that we achieve over time. So through that, we'll be able to keep it fresh.
Councillor Nixon.
Yeah, just a request when this comes back to council. Previously, as I recall, we have been given information on the estimated actual cost to council of investigation, of intensification and greenfield. And I think it would be useful next time it comes around if we're given that information as just another piece of the puzzle that helps us understand what it is we're deciding to do.
Okay, let's, we've got the last bit of the presentation to get through and pass it on to you. Thank you.
Hopefully that pops up in a minute. Cool, so really briefly I just want to touch on the communications and engagement plan because obviously that's critical to the success of this in terms of how we get this out and engaging with the right people that are going to be excited by this guide. So firstly, already spoken about, this will be converted to a web-based format and put on our website. We plan to have a lot of press and engagement on this from obviously mana whenua engagement, particularly given the incorporation of the Te Aranga principles. There'll be press releases, distribution to the development community, and also part of our quarterly residential newsletter as well. We plan to create a basic one-pager because we can't expect that people will read it cover to cover, so this is just to gain interest, provide the key points and the benefits of utilising this guide for any developments. The next one around the info session is, and this kind of captures a few of the questions already raised, is actually rather than just submit this guide and kind of have a one-off engagement with the right people, it's about a continuous communication around actually sharing to them what the guide does, the benefits of the process, understanding and working with them on current sort of, I guess, what issues are preventing developments as it stands. So it's something we can share with them around how we're engaging with medium density development, but also understand from them some of the issues of preventing developments at this stage, how we can look to partner with them in the future, potential pilot opportunities. So it's really, hopefully a really good sort of initial launch, but also that continuous engagement with the right people, and then looking obviously at the end of the 12 months to see, how did that go with the engagement, what are people saying, and then is it reflective in the numbers? And then a few other ideas which we're just working out at the moment is, do we look to do a standard relevant event, so things like the Home and Garden Show, and also exploring case studies and pilots with certain members around how it works and highlighting those benefits. Those can then be incorporated back into the guide, which will obviously be in that web-based format. So that's the plan as it stands. Obviously open to any feedback. We will look to do some press releases, given this will be adopted, but I think given the time of year, the majority of this will be, and the timing of when the development community meetings are held, the majority of this will happen sort of January, February after the Christmas shutdown. That's everything from me.
Thank you. Questions? Any comments?
So if this was launched in end of January, February, can we please make sure the 12-month reviews from the launch date? Thank you.
Any other questions? No? All right. We've got a recommendation that's been amended, and we'll pull that up. We've got a mover and a seconder. All right. So those are the recommendations. We moved by Councillor Kerr, seconded by Councillor Nixon. All those in favour, ki mai aye. Any against, ki mai kao. Kia ora, motion carried. Thank you very much. Bye. All right, let's move down to Item 6 and 7, active transport business case, transport network business case. Kia ora. Hang on, no mic, haere mai.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I don't have a presentation for you today. I'll take the reports as read, but I would just like to highlight the fact that while we followed the NZTA business case process, that was largely to secure their half of the funding, but it also gave us a very good framework to work through the problems with our key stakeholders, to help identify what the key issues are around both active transport and transport in general in Hastings. And we worked through with them to identify potential solutions, potential projects, and to come up with a couple of packages of works that we think will really do Hastings proud and going forward in the future, and improve our transport, both active travel and general transport around the town. Happy to take any questions.
Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, I'm just happy to move, but also just thanks Ian for moving this through. Some of those meetings were held via Zoom during lockdown, consultation and stuff as well. So managed to herd cats during that period of time and keep it moving along. So yeah, just happy to move.
So we have a mover for the recommendations. And seconder, Councillor Sholem. Kia ora. So moved by Councillor Harvey, seconded by Councillor Sholem. All those in favour?
Hold on, got a question.
Yeah. Oh, we'll take those. Yeah, okay, we'll take
Well,
those.
I'd like to make
Yeah,
a
okay.
comment.
Councillor Kerr and then Councillor Nixon. Kia ora.
Just, please can you clarify how set in stone the actions are that fall below this business case, and the ability of council, should it need to or wish to flip roads around, change a little bit? Thanks, Ian.
Yes, so this is very much a work in progress. Well, no, sorry, it's a final document. The key is to get those principles through, but there is still the process of the LTP and the general day-to-day of what projects happen when. But it's to get those key priorities so that going forward we know which ones we want to look at first. But things always change, and we also have the ability to, when other projects are going along, that we can manage to get the best out of them.
Thank you.
So just along that line, in terms of the budget and the financials, they've all got to be, I mean, there's a kind of a general envelope, but each bit of roading and, whatever initiative needs to meet the test.
Through you, Chair, as highlighted in, I think it's recommendation D, Council, through its wider and complete and full budget consideration, will need to work out how much invest into each different area. So what this does is set the direction, the policy intent, and as Ian has mentioned, if there's a change in context, it might be change in order, but the actual how fast you achieve this and what funding is made available is all part of your LTP and subsequent annual plan discussions to be prioritised in a more holistic fashion.
Right. Councillor Nixon.
It's not a question. Councillor Kerr's asked my question already. Very good question. But I look at the little pie charts that we've got, and I don't know if others have looked at them. And the amount of cycling, walking that we're achieving is unbelievably small, in my opinion. And equally with go to school. And what concerns me is councillors are making a decision on sort of the way forward on this issue. But I actually question whether most councillors have the foggiest notion of what it is that we're really planning to do. Now, I'm a regular cyclist, so I've got a good knowledge of our roads and the issues of cycling, particularly the safety issue. And I just really wonder if we are truly going to achieve what we want to achieve going the way we're going. It's the perception of danger is very real. And I've talked to people today who said they would never get on a bike here or anywhere else because it's just perceived as being so dangerous. And I actually think it would be a very good idea, in fact, if we all got on a bike and went out, at 8 o'clock in the morning and just experience what it's like, because you might have a different view of what this agenda item's about. I think Councillor Kerr has brought up the issue: is the plan, can it be sort of massaged and changed slightly? And I think that's going to be essential because we want to get the best result. When you're out there, there's hardly any cycles out there. It doesn't matter what claims we make. And I can remember a previous deputy mayor, not our present deputy mayor, claiming that, with the work we were doing, we were going to see 20,000 cyclists a day riding to work. I'd be surprised if we had 2,000, in fact, a few hundred at most. So I just warn everybody that I'm not convinced that we have exactly got this right. I'm not opposed to it because it is a move in the right direction. We're doing some great projects at the moment, but that's my comment.
Now that cars will be travelling a little bit slower, might help.
It's not the cars. You get next to a truck or a bus, and the wheels up here at your eye level. It's way beyond just a few cars lowering the speed limits, in my opinion.
So that, Councillor.
Yeah, I would like to know how this is going to, how the spatial plan that is being developed for the region and for Hastings District, which is going to include a transport plan, how this is going to fit into that. That's my first question.
Through you, Chair, I think going back to Councillor Kerr's question and Councillor Nixon's comment is what we'll have to do as we work through the region-wide or however the scale of that spatial plan is, we'll have to reconsider these transport plans. There's currently a regional transport plan that's being worked through that's reporting back to district development. So it's a bit of a two-way discussion that will need to be reset. So at the moment there are areas with transport advantage and transport disadvantage. If we change our housing patterns, and in particular if we intensify where people live, we'll get change of travel behaviours. As that spatial plan is developed, we're going to have to go back to what's the existing transport planning and see how that informs our spatial plan. But similarly, how does the spatial plan inform the future transport planning? So it's actually going to have to be a full-on discussion, a two-way around what's our natural advantage and how do we make use of it, and also what do we want to do to protect the plains, particularly productive soils, get some of those eco outcomes, intensity, and what does that mean we have to do from a transport response to enable that and support that. So it's going to be a big two-way conversation moving forward, and this plan is likely there'll be bits that will change to adapt to that changing context.
Yeah, so for that reason, I think it's premature to go too far on this because I think it has to come from the spatial plan and work down rather than committing to this and then doing development and then finding that it's not within the overall picture. And secondly, I'm concerned about some of the principles, and I was thinking about them last week when we were doing the speed limit reviews, and safety came up as a big factor in here. But what I see is, it seems to be the principle that we want all users on the same roads, whether they be bicycles, trucks, cars, scooters, on the same road. And if we just take that to the logical conclusion, we'll be driving 30k per hour everywhere in Hawke's Bay because of the safety implication. So I think we need to look at the principle of what are the main arterial routes where we want traffic to move fast and efficiently, because there is an argument from freight companies, couriers, those sort of people, that it doesn't impact on them economically, but also what's the safest route for cyclists? It doesn't have to be the same road in my mind, but I haven't seen any discussion on that. It just seems to be, well, people go down that road, so we'll put a cycle lane down there, and I'm not sure that's right.
Yes, so no, a very large principle of this is that we identify the preferred cycle routes, and on those routes you provide the high-end infrastructure to attract cyclists off those less safe routes, while acknowledging that all transport users have a right to use all roads. There will be preferred freight routes and there will be preferred cycle routes. And where they are in the same corridor, then you provide separation from them. But ideally you do have them on different roads where possible, but you also have to acknowledge that people want to go to the same places no matter what transport they're using. So it's always a balancing act, but it's very much a principle that we're heading towards, is that where possible, you separate the modes.
I did ask that at our hearings. One of our visitors came in and I said, oh, we've done all these nice bike tracks and highways and everything else, but you know, people just want to be able to get to wherever they want to get to, and it doesn't matter if it's on a road or if there's a nice track there, they'll still take the road. So it's one of those things. Yeah, I find it really difficult to kind of get my head around that, but you know that the bikes can go on any road they want to, and they just seem to do it.
Yeah, well, it's a problem, and we have to find a solution somehow, I think.
So we've got Councillor Nixon, then Councillor Kerr.
Yeah, I did have another question I forgot to ask at the time. To me, we don't actually understand why people won't get on their bikes and ride. And I think, it's all supposition. Yeah, people like me deciding for the masses how we should build cycle tracks and so on. But we're cyclists, so we have a very one-sided view. I think what we need somewhere along the line, before we get too far down this road and spend a lot of money, we need to understand why people don't want to cycle, because I can tell you they don't. 95% or more of the population do not want to get on a bike and ride to work or just about anywhere else. They go out on the tracks to the Cape or somewhere like that. So can I say, I think somewhere in the next year or so, we should really be starting to set up some sort of survey process to find out what we have to do to get people on bikes and whether it's even a practical proposition.
Point of order, you said you were going to ask a question. Sorry, thank you. Well, the question is the rhetoric a lot. Yeah, that's fine. The question, I guess, is what are we doing to collect that information?
So thank you through Mr. Chair. Actually, there has been very good research done around the reasons why people do not cycle. And I think with the recent evidence of the lockdown, I think everyone saw the number of people that were out cycling. So actually the fact that there is a large proportion of the population that do cycle occasionally or wish to cycle. And the main reasons why they don't is either because of fear, so safety issues, and through just inconvenience. So if it's not easy for them to get to where they want to go by a bike, they'll hop in the car to do so. So a big part of what we're trying to achieve through this business case is to make the road network safer and more convenient for people to get to where they want to, either on foot or by cycle if they choose to.
Councillor Kerr.
Thanks. I'm just interested, why have we done this business case? Is it part of the NZTA process that we have to do?
Through you, Chair, yes. All of the transport funding applications have to be supported with business cases for not just the network operating plan and cycling, our road renewals, our safety program. Everyone has quite a substantive amount of work that Jag and his team have had to put together
So
to get half the money.
My questions are relating to both these papers then. Is it acceptable to NZTA that we as a committee endorse this, or does this active transport business case need to be adopted? And if so, should we change the recommendations to say that the active transport business case is adopted if we choose to adopt it?
Through you, Chair, without Mr. Panu here, he's not available this afternoon. I'm not sure they're that explicit, and there's probably councils who haven't gone this far yet. Either way, I'd suggest it's okay, but unless Ian, you know any more.
No, I think this, so how it's gone so far is ticked off NZTA requirements. This is more about heading towards the LTP and council's funding decisions.
Yeah, it just seems the committee endorses didn't seem as powerful as we adopt. And that's really my question to you. If you are satisfied that we endorse?
I mean, we're not expecting to take this anywhere else. So if you want some stronger wording, we can amend.
No, where it goes elsewhere is when we're into the funding discussion, which is a separate, just related but very separate conversation. From an officer perspective, where council endorse the strategy, it does give us more flexibility if there's those change of context to come back without actually having to come back and adopt changes. So I think that makes the strategy a little bit more agile to changes in context rather than going to a full adoption, but happy to take your advice.
In which case, I'm happy to move the recommendations as written.
We've got a mover, Councillor Harvey, and a seconder, Councillor Sholm. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Thank you,
if there's
Chair.
no other... Oh, Malcolm, you've got
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just looking at recommendation C, adopt the recommended program. Quick wins, what's the time frame? Short-term wins, what's the time frame? And how do new projects get onto this list if something comes on board?
Tell Simon.
That is largely the funding decision that will come later with the general LTP, but quick wins are next year, although actually we're getting a couple of them done this year because of extra funding that's become available. And short term is, in my mind, you're looking at 1 to 3 years.
Thank you. And long term is generational.
Long term is 10 plus years, yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so there's no other questions or comments. We've got a mover and a seconder for the recommendations. All those in favour, keep my eye. All right. Any against? Carried. Hey, thank you very much. Thanks, Alan. Awesome. Well, actually, we've got the no, that was for the first paper.
We thought you were doing 2 or 2.
Oh, no, I nearly did 2 at once. If you got, I can do 2 at once, but we better go through this one. So this is transport network business case, so vehicles and whatnot, eh?
So very much the same. We had a slightly different stakeholder group, but we did the same process. We worked in parallel. Some projects that were identified in the active transport business case ended up going over and vice versa. So very much working together. And yes, so happy to take any further questions.
Any questions for this business case?
Can I move this one?
You can move it, Councillor Kerr.
Thank you.
Right, seconder, Councillor Dixon. All those in favour, the recommendations, give my eye. Any against? Carried. Thank you. Awesome. Okay. Oh boy. So next up is item 8, updated strategic risk register and enterprise risk management framework. Regan, kia ora.
Excellent, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, councillors. It's good to be in front of you again. So this is just bringing back to the wider councillor group after a bit of dialogue through our Risk and Assurance Committee on the framework for risk management within council, and most importantly, I suppose, recutting our strategic risks. So in conversation with John Nichols, we felt there was a good opportunity after COVID and with the LTP underway to reconsider what's on our strategic risk register for the councillors to be paying attention to. So the report I'll take as read contains two things. One, hopefully relatively straightforward, which is the framework, which has just been amended by including the risk appetite statements that have previously been adopted by council. And then more significantly, what we're proposing after previous, I suppose, work observation through the LTP workshops, conversations through risk and assurance, some feedback from the executive team, we've come to a landing on this current proposed list of strategic risks, but now we're keen to get wider feedback from all the councillors as to whether you agree with that or whether you see further items that we should be considering. So happy to take questions.
Questions, councillors? Councillor Koo?
I'm just wondering if you could give a brief overview of the significant changes that we bundled up many of the strategic risks and put them under one title. I think that would be beneficial if you could share that thinking with us all.
Yep, very good, absolutely. When we were looking through the existing risk register that we've got, that's at the strategic level, there are 20 items on it. Reviewing that, we felt that most of those are actually very operational management related issues such as fraud and corruption, cybersecurity, and other aspects around operational delivery, business continuity, and those sorts of things that really are better taken care of at the management level. Within council now, we do have a regular bi-monthly meeting of the executive team that acts as a lead assurance team that looks after those tier 2 risks, if you like, the ones that are just down from the strategic risk level, but are still of enterprise-wide importance to the organisation. So there's now a good place for those risks to be managed, and it gives us the opportunity to simplify the register at the strategic level. Essentially, we've done that by wrapping up all of those operational issues that the management team will now look after and representing them as one item on this current risk register. So there's still a chance or opportunity for you to ask questions around operational delivery, the integrity of the systems that we're using, business continuity and those sorts of things. But it means we can reframe some of the other risks so that they're a bit broader and think or touch on district-wide issues. So already this afternoon there's been conversation in the residential intensification around how environmental aspects should play out. What I would be proposing is that the new risk register cites those items that throughout all the policies we should be overlaying that same sort of lens. So environmental protection, there's issues around social cohesion, if you like, and ensuring equality within the community. Those are other aspects that we would want to be seeing across all council policies. So by adopting risks more of that nature at the strategic level, it reinforces the desire of the council to see those things embedded across all of what council does and not just handled in isolation.
Councillor Sholem.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. I've got a bit of a question around, so forgive me, scrolling through this document takes a little while, so I may use the wrong terminology, but I think it was operational failure, which was where we're lumping in, am I correct, the fraud, the cybersecurity, the business continuity, all of that sort of stuff, is that correct?
That's correct. Yep.
Yeah, so this may not, and forgive me if I am asking a question that may not be quite suited to this item, but I'll ask it anyway and perhaps someone can direct me. I have ongoing concerns about IT. Not because I see evidence within this organisation that we're failing. I just know that inherently organisations like council do tend to milk what IT they have until it's absolutely on its last legs, because of the risk that actually change management in itself can present from moving from one system to another. And one of the things I'm really interested in is some information and assurance around how we are handling IT, both internal and external, so how we are interacting. So I'm going to hurl that at you as a broad question and just see if you can give me some information back.
There was some discussion at Risk Insurance Committee around cybersecurity or cyber aspects. At the time, the result was, yes, we acknowledge that is really important, and it is becoming increasingly important for top tables, such as the council, to be aware of how we are protecting our digital resources, including information that we hold. At the time, the view was we could still do that through that operational risk item and reporting back up the regular reviews that the IT team do, both internal and external, about their actions to protect and to ensure the integrity of our infrastructure. But if there's a general desire that that should receive more attention from the top table, that is a valid thing to do, and we could then just include a cybersecurity item as another strategic risk. So essentially we'd end up with 10 items, or if there's a view that we could drop another one and balance it out, that's also fine. So having a perspective from others around the table will be quite helpful on that.
So if I may elaborate, so my concerns are perhaps broader than just cybersecurity. Absolutely, that is to me quite a high level risk factor, particularly because of the extent and the quality of the data that we hold on behalf of our ratepayers. But also I see risk in organisations like councils, and again I'm not talking specifically about this council, I'm talking broadly, around almost an assumption that IT is something that will just happen and rock on. And so whether or not we've got enough attention, budget and oversight in that area. So for me personally, yes, I would like to see IT as a whole reported back on in our risk register. But yeah, as I said, broadening it beyond just cybersecurity.
Very good. Yep, we can certainly frame the risk in that broader context if that's what's desired.
Can I just make a comment, Chair? So there's a lot of work that's going on within our IT space to keep our manage our risks appropriately, and that is being reported through, as Regan mentioned, through to our lead team assurance meetings we have on a bi-monthly basis. I think one thing that we probably can do better, and that's either alongside of incorporating IT risk as a strategic risk, or in place of, is actually how we report the activities of what we're doing in the IT space more regularly through to council. I know Andrew Smith, our Chief Information Officer, made a start in the last ops and monitoring report that you remember, around detailing the activities that are going on, the changes that have been made, the projects that are underway currently. I think that was a good start around presenting to council the activity that's happening in that space. And I certainly think there's scope to evolve that more as we move forward, to provide council with the assurance that we're not running IT to the point of failure. We are being proactive around the upgrades when they're needed, not when they're about to break or we're no longer supported on the software that we have. I think, and in some cases, we're in a little bit of a catch-up phase in that space as well. For those of you that are around the table prior to the amalgamation discussion will know that a lot of the Hawke's Bay councils stopped investing in IT infrastructure and support, but through that time, on the basis that there could possibly be change and sort of a reluctance to invest heavily, and all of the Hawke's Bay councils have been sort of catching up since then, which does take time because, as you alluded to, change. An organisation can only cope with so much change at any one point in time as we move our way forward. So I think there's certainly ways that we can improve how we report back to council to provide that assurance, not just through the ops and monitoring reporting mechanism, but also through our Risk and Assurance Committee. And when we've done that in the past, particularly focus on cyber security and what we're doing to keep the organisation safe on that aspect, but we can certainly look at doing some more of that as well.
Thank you. I'd really endorse that, both the ops and monitoring reporting and through risk and assurance.
So good.
May I make a comment, please? I wouldn't like to see the recommended changes to the strategic risk register made. I think the changes that have been made are really robust, but I do support Councillor Shollam's request for reporting and further information. So I still think essentially the responsibility sits operationally with management, but councillors have acknowledged we know it is a high risk. In fact, the inherent risk is extreme. Even with all treatments that we can give it, it still remains residually a high risk. So I support Councillor Shollam's request for more reporting back to us, but I don't recommend a change to the strategic risk register. From today's meeting, I support what has been put in front of us and this cluster of operational risks sitting with management.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Nixon.
Actually, I believe we should make a change to the recommendation. I was a party to the development of this list, and somehow I think IT risk just didn't get seen. I mean, there are others sitting around the table that are on the Risk and Assurance Committee. I think we should add something in that reflects Councillor Shollam's concerns. I don't have the words, but there are other people around here that are quicker at me than putting something together that just draws attention to the need to identify and examine the risk in our IT function to the list that's already on page, whatever it is, 68. Can we get something? Look at Tanya, you're quick at doing this sort of thing.
Yeah.
Make a question. The recommendations state that the committee recommend the revised strategic risk register to council for adoption. So once again, I'm coming back to the sense of does council have to adopt this risk register? If so, then I think we just put a simple comment that the comments from today be gathered and then gets worked up by staff and put to council. Or if we have the ability to adopt it today on behalf of council because we are council, then that doesn't give me quite so much time to change the recommendation to something that I actually disagree with.
Are we happy with that? I mean, just rather than changing up the framework. I mean, those your comments are valid, and from what I'm hearing is they are incorporated in one of the levels there.
That's correct, but we certainly, I think, by the sound of it, should be pushing an item around the way council manages its information technology onto the strategic register, regardless of those other changes.
Chair, could I just suggest we hear what the other councillors have got to say, and then we can
This has to be a council decision. Okay, so let's go.
I've finished.
You finished? Yep. Councillor Travers.
First of all, I would like to really commend the work that's gone into the risk appetite terminology. You will recall the last time this came before council, there was some considerable disquiet in the descriptors that were used that didn't entirely hit the nail on the head, and they now do, which is great. In talking about our risk matrix, etc., etc. I just think there's a real danger in relying upon neat, tidy little lists that assess and rank our risk. For the simple reason that prior to March this year was pandemic in the top 5. I guess what I'm trying to say is we live in such a volatile and ever-changing world that we sit here smugly believing we know what's going to happen next, and we believe what's most likely and next most likely, but in fact we don't know. So underlying this whole thing needs to be an attitude of mind, which is constantly looking for potential challenges and working out potentially what could happen. That's almost more important than a tidy little matrix where we kind of satisfy it. Yes, we've done that. Well, in fact, we probably haven't because we don't actually know.
Councillor Sean.
Thank you. Just following the discussion of other councillors, I do agree that we don't necessarily need to change the strategic risk register as it's been proposed. If however, that extra reporting around IT can be acknowledged and possibly come through ops and monitoring and potentially to risk and assurance on an ongoing basis, I don't think it means the register needs to be changed. I'm comfortable it's been wrapped into that operational item, but as I said, I just want to emphasise I would like more reporting coming to council on those items. So I'm happy with the recommendations as they are.
Right, Councillor Kerr.
I was just going to try and come up with some words, but I've just completely changed them now from what Wendy has said. But I do think a recommendation that the committee requests an increased level of reporting back to council on information technology risks. Keep it really simple, and whether it's council ops and monitoring, whatever is the best fit.
Need to wrap that into the recommendation. Okay.
I'm happy to move those recommendations if they can be popped up on the screen.
Moved by Councillor Kerr, seconded by Councillor Nixon. Right. So it's my understanding that this needs to come through council to be fully adopted. So it'll be a recommendation to council. Is that right, Jackie?
Sorry.
This needs to come. This needs to be taken through council.
It does need to go through council because risk and assurance.
Okay. All right.
Who can remember when we used to have the overhead projector and somebody would actually write on a piece of acetate paper and the overhead projector would then shine it up on a screen? Kev?
What training did we do? Yes. We used mine last night.
So we have an updated, amended recommendation. We have a mover and a seconder. All those in favour, give my eye. Those against, Kyle. Motion carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, team, for your hard work. Yeah, awesome. Councillor Kerr moved. Councillor Nixon seconded. Go by. Item 9, councillors, Hawke's Bay Business Hub, operational strategy and key result areas. Kia ora, Kim, welcome.
Great, thank you. We were asked to develop the operational strategy and key result areas for the Hawke's Bay Business Hub in Hastings. I've taken the report as read. Has anyone got any questions?
That's good.
A really simple one, and Kev's going to love me for this. Why is it called the Hawke's Bay Business Hub in Hastings as opposed to the Hastings Business Hub? I haven't been involved in this, but when I've just looked at it and went, why is this not the Hastings Business Hub? The reason being, somebody new or somebody within our CBD or within our business sector, they're not going to necessarily look for a Hawke's Bay Business Hub in Hastings. I think they're going to look for a Hastings Business Hub source of information. Yeah, so I just rather the lead with Hastings, but that's my question.
Good question. It was developed as part of the hub and spoke model with through Business Hawke's Bay and the Ahuriri Business Hub, which is the Hawke's Bay Business Hub, and the Hastings is the spoke of the Hawke's Bay Business Hub, hence the Hastings came secondary. But yeah, good point. Has anyone else got any other comments on that?
Are you okay with that?
Yeah, well,
Councillor?
I accept the answer, and then I'm going, once again, I haven't been involved in this. Ops and monitoring approved an allocation of 70,000 towards this. So if we're funding it, I just hear myself quoting Kevin here, Hastings should come first.
Yes.
And if we don't own Hastings and put Hastings first, nobody else is. So could be completely out of order here, but I'm just actually thinking this should be the Hastings Business Hub Hawke's Bay, but not Hawke's Bay Business Hub Hastings. And I don't know if there needs to be any recommendations to change it because this is a reporting back to us. So can I throw that out there and leave it for...
Councillor Harvey and
I was just going to pose something there. That is the formal sort of official name or the way, the approach that has been taken. But we have not seen how it's going to be branded or messaged or communicated. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's where it is taken on board, that there's a recommendation that, from formal naming of it is this when it comes in documents and stuff, but actually that is a facility or a venue, it's branded differently.
Good idea.
May I respond to that?
Yeah.
So just reading the room, would it be appropriate that I added a C, that consideration be given to a branded name of Hastings Business Hubs? Full stop. Okay. I might want to pick that up. Recommendation C, consideration of. Recommendation that the
You have the thoughts on the naming
Hastings
stuff?
Business Hub. Sorry, I'm way out of tune here.
Councillor Shaw?
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I have a few questions around the KRAs. Looking at agency and general utilisation of whatever the hub's called, or the Hastings Hub, yes. I'm looking at one of the measures we're looking at is the number of drop-in visitors. I think for my peace of mind, looking at the hub and this trial and seeing what's successful, I'm more interested in the number of businesses as opposed to the number of individuals that go through the hub. So even if the measure of number of individual visitors coming through is recorded, I'd really want that metric of what is the number of businesses, because it could be there's 6 people from one business come in, and actually it's the businesses we're touching and helping that's the main thing that I want to understand. Similar for clients and their appointments each month at the hub. So number of appointments, again, it's number of appointments for specific businesses. So how many businesses are we assisting? The other thing that I'm interested in engaging as well is it looks like the hub's ethos is very much a collaborative one and looking at working with partners. So then in that case, I'm really interested in the KRA around, I guess, referrals or utilisation of other partners, and I'm not quite sure how we measure that. So making sure that, you know, if the hub identifies that actually a business might be, for argument's sake, is supported or helped by a specific external provider that may not even be part of like the regional business partners or anything, just having that record just so that we understand that the hub is working in collaboration with other entities rather than at odds with.
So we do capture the number of agencies that are in there as part of the reporting back in the dashboard. We've also, I thought it was in here that we had captured the number of businesses that were in. I see that we've got visitors. I'll make sure that it's clear that it's businesses as well. Yeah.
And so again, that whole, sorry, through you, Chair, that whole referral thing, I'm thinking outside of necessarily just the hub providers though. It might be that you identify other entities that sit outside of that, so just making sure the KRAs capture that as well. But yeah, because that'll then give us really solid information at the end of this trial to decide what the future of the hub is. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sears.
Thank you, Chair. I had some similar questions, but maybe you've answered them. The dashboard production, maybe that's going to contain a lot more information than I thought, because in a similar vein to other things that we've been talking about, if we can't see very clearly what the benefits have been, we're just not able to reflect them back. So is the dashboard going to, or is this going to come up in employer business survey? Are we going to be able to clearly, or do we have a setup to be able to clearly see from where they've come from to what they've achieved and where they might be going through the intervention of the hub? I mean, they're not all listed in here. It just says dashboard and survey. So I'm really interested probably in what those...
So the dashboard is still under development. Business Hawke's Bay will develop that dashboard. The hope is that we will get the metrics out of that in terms of, with the survey, okay, how has that helped your business? That all the businesses are so different that it's difficult to, and some of the results that they will get are long-term results rather than immediate. So, but the dashboard is still being developed at the moment, and we hope to have as much information as we can in there to ensure that when it comes to making a decision on whether this has been a benefit or not, we've got all the metrics required to make that decision.
Further question, Mr. Chair? So does Business Hawke's Bay not already have a dashboard that does that?
Through you, Chair, sorry, I actually don't know whether they have one in place at the moment, but we've said that this is what we want for here.
Another question. In terms of timing, there's no timeline here, so do we have we secured a premises for the hub?
Through you, Chair, yes, a premises has been secured. It is going to be in the Hive. It will start in December, open its doors. There will be a formal opening a little bit later, but that is all secured. There is a business connector person, a role has been appointed, and they start actually, I think, on the 16th of November, getting training, so in how the hub model all works. So yeah, it's all progressing, and we'll go from there.
Councillor Sean.
Sorry, one last thing that I forgot to mention before, which I'm really keen to understand in this as well, is when the individuals, the different facilitators or the business connector that sits within the hub helps a business identify, perhaps someone comes in with an HR requirement, for example. What I'm keen to understand is where that business is referred to, hoping that if this is the Hastings hub, we are supporting Hastings providers. I do know from experience and being a provider myself through the Hawke's Bay Business Hub that there are kind of a preferred pool, but I do want to see us kind of propagating our own business community. So trying to understand how we do that, how we facilitate that.
Councillors, I'd just like to point out that this was part of the COVID-19 recovery proposal, and we have already been through the process of you requesting us to engage with the management of the Business Hub in Hastings, and we have approved the funding, and we have engaged with Business Hawke's Bay through the Hawke's Bay Business Hub to deliver this. To Councillor Kerr's point about naming rights, we've got a contract for service with the Hawke's Bay Business Hub, and it's a hub and spoke model, and they are a business. So if you are asking us to rename the facility the Hastings Hub, we're effectively asking a business to rename themselves to something that we want. Contractually, we've signed up to call it the Hawke's Bay Business Hub in Hastings. It's a hub and spoke model. There are also these hubs in Waipawa, is my understanding. There's going to be one in Wairau. So that's the first point. My opinion is that we can't change the recommendations because the recommendations on this report are to report back to you on how we're going to report to us. Yeah. So we were never asking for a renaming of the hub as the Hastings Hub or anything like that. And as I understand it, with council buying a service from the Hawke's Bay Business Hub, we cannot dictate what it was called. Okay, so I don't see how we can change the recommendation. And secondly, they are going to deliver what we've engaged them to deliver around a contract for service, which we've been working quite seriously on for the last couple of weeks to get underway, and we're delivering what was required when the original paper was put up to council. Anything to add?
No, that's it.
In terms of Councillor Sholom's question about business from Hastings, being encouraged.
Where appropriate.
Yeah.
So,
Hastings businesses being.
To that point, Councillor Sholom, I'd just like to say that there is a connector role that's been engaged as part of that, and that person's been employed for that role. By connector in this case, connector is with the services that are currently sitting from government agencies in the Hawke's Bay Business Hub in Ahuriri. Those are NZTE, Callaghan, Regional Business Partners, etc. And the idea is that they will report back on those Hastings businesses that come into the Hawke's Bay Business Hub in Hastings to connect with their services. So that information we're hoping will come through and we can report back to you so we can determine if this trial is worth supporting past 1st of July 2021. Okay, so we're not paying the connector to actually provide the services. We're paying the connector to connect with those government agencies that are currently located in Ahuriri that we're encouraging to come across into the Hastings hub. Does that answer? Do you understand how that's going to work?
I do understand. I guess my concern sits with the fact that it's Hastings ratepayers paying to provide this Hastings hub trial, which I'm happy with the trial to see what comes of it. As part of that, it would be nice to see us supporting Hastings business. I understand what you're saying in terms of the connector refers into those other government entities who then have their providers. But perhaps it's the business connector can be talking to Hastings businesses about becoming things like a regional business partner provider, or I'm conscious that there is a pool, a preferred pool, particularly for that one service that we're talking about, and that a good portion of that is Napier based, and it doesn't necessarily have to be. I'm not trying to say that all the best service providers necessarily sit in Hastings, because I would be remiss to say that. But I do think there are missed opportunities for Hastings businesses, and wherever we can, when we are using Hastings ratepayer funds, which a portion of that is from Hastings businesses, we should be trying to help those within our patch.
For you, Mr. Chair, I'd like to say I fully agree and support, and that's certainly something we try to do wherever possible, is to see that the ratepayers' funding is always respent in Hastings businesses. And I will pass your comments along to Hawke's Bay Business Hub providers.
Thank you. And if we can also, just going a step further, because I appreciate you passing that on, seek to find out what reporting might be possible to come back to us to get a broad understanding of when businesses are connected to a service provider through the various organisations. Is that service provider, this is all I want, is that service provider Napier or Hastings based? Just so we get a broad understanding of what percentage of that support service is going to what area. Thank you.
Boy, Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the work that has gone on, and that there have been a couple of hiccups in regards to obviously a venue, which has therefore delayed actually it being up and running. And now we're going to be opening in first 2 months, which are probably the quietest months for businesses to actually be operating because they're all out at the beach and on holiday. So therefore, I'm actually concerned that we're setting it up for failure a little bit in relation to those numbers that are likely to, and even from a promotional point of view, you've said a soft launch, which I agree with, and wouldn't even be looking or suggesting a hard launch until February. So that, therefore, I was looking at the dates, and I'm just now concerned that, that really this is not going to kick off until February. And we will only be able to record or analyse 4 months of stats and see how effective it's been.
Through you, Mr. Chair. This is a really valid concern. It's something that we've shared as well and discussed. We have pushed the dates out as far as we possibly can in terms of getting some of those statistics back in so that we can actually present those back to the District Development Committee, and Business Hawke's Bay will come in and give a presentation to the District Development Committee. That is around the 30th of April, dependent on meetings, so that we've got as much information as possible to put into that report to actually decide which way we go with that. But yeah, we share your concern. Unfortunately, we're just driven by timeframes. We just want to have as much detail as we can to make sure that we make an informed decision.
Through Mr. Chair, just adding on to the timeframe and reiterating the point, the funding that you've approved gets the trial underway and takes it through to the balance of this financial year. Correct. So, one of the constraints we have going forward is that at some stage council's going to have to make a decision as to whether there's a budgetary consideration for next year, and the time for that is rather constrained, and I think so. The latest we could do would be sometime in May would be to make a submission, an office submission of sorts to our own long-term plan process to get some funding in. Should there be enough information at that time to support doing that? So the timing's not ideal around funding and setting this up to funding going forward on a long-term basis.
Councillor Kerr?
Yeah, I'm just going to come back to the name change, because the way I read this report, we're being asked to adopt an operational strategy in key results area. Part of the operational strategy is to establish and manage a physical presence, coordinate the opening, provide and deliver, part of that's a comms plan. And then 6.1 says to finalise a contract for services. So I didn't think it was in such a state where we couldn't actually go back and say, we recommend, consider that these premises are known as the Hastings Business Hub. I understand what you're saying, that we are purchasing contract for service from a business, but I think it would be remiss of me not to push back and say, yeah, but can you ask them to consider, please? And that's what I'm doing. If we want our Hastings businesses to engage with something that they feel is their own, that they can grow with, or people within the Hastings district can come into something that is of Hastings, I think we need to label it. And yeah, Business Hawke's Bay may come back and say no. It's a contract for service where both parties have to agree. So I still would like I have to once again read the room, whether there's room in the word I had written down, consideration of the premises being known as Hastings, the Hastings Hub or Hastings Business Hub. I'll just leave it at that.
I mean, we could just put that over as an action, not necessarily change the recommendation, or what are you asking for something a bit more?
That's why I chose the word consider. We ask that the name be considered as. I think it would be inappropriate to say it has to be, because a contract is a negotiation, is an agreement between two entities. So we're only one entity. Look, I may be wrong. Everybody may be just like, that's fine, just don't worry about it.
Anyone else want to speak on this particular issue? Councillor?
Yeah. I wonder whether the middle ground is something like Business Hawke's Bay Hastings Hub, because because what we're doing is creating a hub for Business Hawke's Bay, but we're doing it in Hastings. We're not inventing a new offering. We're putting in some measures and reporting, etc., on it, but basically it's the offering of Business Hawke's Bay.
Okay. So, I mean, are people thinking that, what's the feeling? I mean, my feeling is we just send this back to the staff to ask them to consider, to raise what was mentioned in this meeting, and if there's a scope to take off the other hubs and just put Hastings Hub, then we can do that, rather than going into having a formal recommendation around that. Are people comfortable with that? Oh, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not too worried about what we call the trial hub right now. I think if we decide to adopt it as an ongoing entity, if we're really happy with the trial afterwards, I think I'd be really comfortable giving the staff the direction then, once we firm up a contract, that this is the way it's got to be, please. So perhaps we look at fighting that battle then. I do support what Councillor Kerr's saying, though. I do think that if it becomes a long-term thing, we need to be really identifying it as Hastings. For me, though, probably a change to the recommendations if it's deemed necessary, because I'm just rereading these. B says that that the council/committee adopt the the Hawke's Bay, Freudian slip there, the Hawke's Bay Business Hub Hastings operational strategy and key result areas. Based on the comments that I made before, do we need to make a change to that recommendation to acknowledge the change to the KRAs that I've requested? Because they're not currently listed within the report.
Through you, Chair. I've just had another look. We do have, as a KRA, in their clients and their appointments each month with the Hawke's Bay Business Hub Hastings. And by clients, we actually mean the businesses that are coming in.
Can you direct me where that is? Sorry, I'm
so that is under the key result areas, 4.3 in the table.
Which column in the table? Sorry.
4.3 in the table.
Yeah, but which cell? Sorry, I'm just trying to find it.
Okay.
Okay, clients and their appointments, I see.
Yeah.
Each month. So, but looking at agency/general utilisation, that's where I wanted to see that business tracking as well, rather than just number of people coming through.
As a way forward, we can just tag on to the recommendation to include the council's feedback.
Yeah,
as part of the recommendation, we can kind of wrap that all in there.
That would make me comfortable, because I'm guessing that would also wrap into that the request for reporting on where workers
and
referred
also
to.
the name, that can all be wrapped up in that little
If
end of
that
the
is,
sentence, okay?
if that is the revised recommendation, I'm very happy to move that, by the way.
Right.
Through you, Chair, I just want to clarify, are the councillors going to be satisfied if the name doesn't change from the Hawke's Bay Business Hub in Hastings? One of the reasons is I know the branding's about to go up on the outside of the building. And I hate you to be disappointed. Can you consider that?
Yeah, no. I think the question can be asked, but whatever the answer is the answer, and then just carry on.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm still concerned about B, that the Strategy and Policy Committee adopt Hawke's Bay Business Hub Hastings. I like what Councillor Kerr was saying. I'd like the recommendations to refer to that, whether it be the Hastings branch or the Hastings whatever. It has to have Hastings predominantly in there. That's what a bank would do, BNZ, Hastings branch. It's exactly the same.
As has been stated, we have a name. It is currently the name that has been discussed and seemingly agreed off on. There is some branding that's about to go up. We're going to go back and ask if we can change the name to Hastings Hub. So I think that we're going to tag on taking into consideration our council's feedback, and I think that should just be part of that. I don't think we're in a position to be changing the names in these recommendations because we have a contract with the business.
With due respect, if I may, it doesn't say we have a contract. That we're being asked. 6.1 says we're being asked about it.
We've been told it's the situation. Yeah. So I think we need to move forward. I hear your concerns. Yeah. We'll give it to you, Councillor. I'm just trying to address this issue here. So,
My turn. I'll be brief. I understand exactly what you say, Lee, but it would be remiss of me, and I know my deputy colleague would never forgive me, if I didn't support Hastings as being up there somewhere. And Malcolm, I sort of support your idea, Hastings sub, an arm or a branch of Hawke's Bay Business, or so. I mean, there's got to be an answer in there somewhere. Through you, Chair, I just had to say, Tanya, I appreciate your push on this, and I support it.
Councillor Kerr.
Yeah, it's just from my point of view, what we've been asked to do. And the comment at the bottom 6.1, the next steps are to finalise a contract for service. So that is why I came to this thinking there's room to change. I hadn't been aware that the branding's going up immediately, that the contract for service is pretty much done and dusted, that we couldn't change the name, because I read this report quite differently. I read this that in September, there was a directive given to develop an operational strategy and key result areas. Today, we're looking at the operational strategy and key result areas, and the contract for service is next step is to be finalised. That's why I had an expectation that we should be able to put an additional recommendation that this committee recommends the name is, or consideration being given to a name of. And and my point was Hastings was the lead name. Okay. So I'm happy.
Thanks. Bruce got a response.
So just to clarify a point, I think at the time of writing, this report was correct that the contract for service was to be finalised as of a day or two ago, it had been finalised and agreed, so that probably hasn't helped with your interpretation of the report. But I think what we can do at the start, what Lynn can do is actually go back and can ask, and we'll see where we go.
Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thank you. It would be remiss of me to wade in on this, actually, to be honest. Sorry, guys. 1B is actually just talking about the strategy rather than actually what the name of the building will be. But when this was put to council, we were asked for governance oversight and therefore involvement. And this has pretty much been the only opportunity to wade into that conversation.
Go boy. Did you want to?
Do you have a mover and a seconder?
No, not yet. But did you move it? Okay, we have a mover. Councillor Sholland.
I would happily second it if there was an acceptance of a third bullet point at this committee.
Okay.
A request consideration of a name change to Hastings Business Hub. So we're requesting consideration. It's part of, from what I saw, was the negotiations. Understanding the contract may be signed, but this is important to many of us, and just gives a very clear indication. So I would happily second that if the mover would be acceptable. Thank you, Wendy.
Councillor
I'm not sure that Hastings Business Hub alone is satisfactory, because it is a branch of Business Hawke's Bay, and we're talking about collaboration with Business Hawke's Bay and using all of the networks and relationships that they've got. We're not setting up our own business hub. So I don't think that name, I wouldn't support that name. I think it has to have Business Hawke's Bay in it somewhere.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on the name? Because yeah, otherwise we just have to go around and to see where people sit with this. Because I'm feeling that some may support it, some may not.
Hastings Hawke's Bay Business Hub.
Can I just suggest something here that we had exactly the same issue with the Opera House or Toi Toi and facilities or venues or whatever, blah, 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 and whether there is just some of us that may be able to, outside of this meeting, help come up with something that will give some views on what might be appropriate. I'm not too sure, but does it actually have to be something?
So consideration to a name change. Happy, and then full stop?
Yeah, consideration to a name change.
That's it.
Okay, so we're looking at an amendment to the recommendation to consider to have a group.
Oh, what's that?
Small
I think
group.
Lee's heard pretty clearly what I think.
A practical question, when is the sign writing to go up, please, Lee?
This morning? You've got to have a sense of
Through you, Chair. We're not exactly sure. We were expecting it to be in the next couple of weeks.
Oh, so there is a day or two in which a conversation could take place. Thank you.
Plenty of time.
We've got some amendments here for you to have a look at and see if people are happy.
Should be a very simple sentence. Simple sentence? Oh, I knew I was going to. Beautiful.
That's fine.
Mover of the recommendation, happy with that, Councillor? Seconder? Come right. I'll put that in motion. Sorry.
Can I comment on that first? I just actually want to back up a little bit of what Alwyn's saying. The Hawke's Bay Business Hub and its branding is relatively well known. I mean, what we are doing is creating a we're building on the skills and branding already of the Hawke's Bay Business Hub. So I'm happy with C, consideration, but I'm aware actually the little shape and colours actually tell people in Hastings about what we're doing, and it may be as simple as using the branding, Hawke's Bay Business Hub, and we have Hastings written in a large way beside it or near it. So I wouldn't like to see us lose this part, because actually this is already established for business community. They know what they're coming to.
Okay, so staff can take that into consideration when you have your negotiation. Okay, so we have a mover and a seconder. Put the motion. All those in favour of the recommendations as outlined on the screen, key my eye. Those against, carried. Thank you very much. Kia ora tātou. Hey, just mindful that you know, we've gone over our cup of tea time. I was hoping to actually finish the public side of the meeting, but that can't apply. So, what are people thinking? I mean, we've just got reports from subcommittees to go. Do you want to get through those before we have a cup of tea and then get into the informals? Yep. Okay. All right. So we'll move into the subcommittee reports. We'll take the reports as read, and the officers and the chairs of the committees, if you want to comment on anything, highlight or whatever, you can do so. So let's start with the great communities. Yeah. Okay, so we've got to move in a seconder.
Just one question, Chair. The Mahi for Youth at Hiratonga Street, how's it going? And what's happened to the outside activities and the seating that were there? Thank you.
Thank you, through you, the Chair. The shop is going really well. We've got a full complement of staff on board now. And with our relocation back to our new office site, we've been able to set it up so it's more youth-friendly again. Otherwise, it looked like an office. And we've just started to reactivate the space outside, so the chairs and the beanbags are all out.
What? Councillor Watkins?
So Denise, when has the full complement of staff been operating? Because I've been in there on many occasions and it's shut up shop, lights out, doors closed, nobody in there.
Thank you, through you, the Chair. So the operating hours are 10 till 3:30 at the moment, and we will look to change that as the seasons go through. So during winter, no one's around after 3:30 in the CBD with the young people that we're required to come in and see us. So we will look to change the hours as we move through summer. So the complement's just come on over the last 3 to 4 weeks. We've had a full team on board.
So earlier this week,
Remember, we also are mobile as well, so we do need to go out and see some of our clients in our businesses as well. But I can follow through. Thank you.
Any other questions? No, we have moved in the seconder. I'll put the motion that the Great Community Subcommittee report be accepted. Those in favour, key my eye. Those against, carried. Thank you. District planning and bylaws. Councillor Watkins, or you want to? It's all there. Yep.
Happy to move.
Question.
Got a question? Councillor Howard?
I've got a question.
Go away.
And I think you've brought it up, Mr. Smith. You've got the gaming stuff in there, and we've got those in December, and there's a question around conflicts and stuff when those arise. So is that a full council? They full council meetings in December, and therefore, how many are actually? How are we going to work out the exclusions?
Hand that over to our legal counsel.
I take the opportunity during the informals after
Okay with that? Yep, cool. If there's no other questions, I'll get a mover. Councillor Watkins, you want to move? Move, seconder. Councillor Travers, all those in favour, we accept the bylaws committee report. Keep my eye. Aye. Those against? Carried. Thank you very much, Councillor Watkins. Eco districts, Councillor Redstone's not here, so Councillor Sears.
Thank you. I did want to say a little bit, sorry, I know everyone's ready for a cup of tea. But as most of you are aware, we still haven't nailed down the strategy for eco-districts. And while that's disappointing in one sense, I think in another, given the move within the whole of council and with the councillors towards really starting to consider the environmental impact and ways we can influence that across all aspects of council is, I think, really growing, and the conversations that are being had with on public levels with officers and within ourselves, I think it may be that it's an opportunity for our committee to think in different ways and quite transformational ways about the way we might approach integrating environmental concerns into all aspects of the way we're running council. So while it's disappointing, yes, I hope that come early next year we'll have something that will be quite impressive and perhaps even inspirational for other councils to follow. You will have read the report. I also just wanted to add we did have a really fantastic workshop, biodiversity workshop with the Hawke's Bay Biodiversity Group, Professor Clarkson from Waikato University and Napier City Council Deputy Mayor Annette Brosnan joined us, as did Hanewai Ormsby from Regional Council, and we also had informal time together after that, and I think that started to show the type of relationships across all our councils that are starting to develop in ways of thinking differently. Biodiversity can also be a way that you can think about your assets even. I mean, that might sound strange to you, but it's a way of thinking that can be quite transformational in the district. So I can see that Councillor Dixon's got something he wants to add to that really positively about that. Yeah. Yeah, it was really wonderful.
Also the common thought amongst the councils.
Yes, that across all councils that there was real interest in biodiversity. So, thank you.
You happy to move your report? And second, Councillor Dixon. All those in favour, keep my eye. Those against, carried. Thank you very much. Eco Districts and District Development Subcommittee. Councillor Kerr. I have a mover, seconder. Councillor Travers. Those in favour, keep my eye. Those against, carried. Kia ora. So that adjourns our Councillor, got a question?
I'd just like to make comment or an observation that Mr. Cameron, prior to taking leave, actually put together a template for each of the reports, which maybe one has adhered to and others haven't. And I just wondered whether we are going to get some consistency with the next round of these reports to those, please.
So this is the first time. This is the first time we have used the templates for this meeting. So just encourage subcommittee chairs and deputies to, just look at. I mean, tables are cool. Provide a snapshot of what's on the work program. So I think it'll be something that will be refined, but take on Councillor Harvey's comments, which try and stick towards as close as possible to the template, just to provide that consistency. All right. So if there's nothing else, that adjourns our the public part of our hui. We do have informal, so we can turn off the the screen, and we'll adjourn for a cup of tea and come back at